Today we're making an alien. Not that alien, but a friendly giant called Clue for my Unreal Engine short film. Let's get to it. Welcome to Feed on Visual. I know it took me a while, but I made progress on the short film and I would like to share that progress with you. We made Eve and Bob, and the last of our three amigos is Glue. Yes, it's the first name that popped into my head. I had made a couple of reference images using AI and had a pretty good idea of how I wanted this thing to look and move. So the first actual step was to model him in Blender by plugging out the main shapes and then sculpting the rest. It's been a long time since I sculpted a character, so it took me a minute to find my flow, but luckily since this is an imaginary alien, I don't have to be super precise with anatomy. But of course that base knowledge does help, and largely it follows human body structure. I wanted him to be a big boy, so he's quite tall and round, and also kept in mind that most of his body will be covered by clothes, so again I didn't spend a whole lot of time detailing parts that we'll never see in the end. I did, however, detail his hands, as I knew I wanted a close-up shot of his hands. And of course the face needed a good amount of detail. At first, I was planning to do the retopology manually. I swear. But then I didn't want to. Listen, if this was my main character, or even the secondary character, I would have done it. But this dude is third on the list and doesn't need to do any acrobatics in the film, so I uploaded my sculpt to Tripo AI and let it do the retopo for me. It took minutes, and while not perfect, I think it'll work just fine for this purpose. I did redo the eyelids since I knew they would have to animate and compress, but otherwise I didn't waste time on it. I don't like retopo. Sue me. I also did the least amount of work for the UVs. I assigned a couple of seams and just tried out different unwrapping options until something looked decent, and went with it. Can you tell I'm a little pressed for time? For the longest time, I couldn't decide what to do with his mouth, or whether he would even need a mouth, if it would be visible behind his big nose. So he just had this ugly gap there as a placeholder for most of this video. Another challenge was his tentacles. I never even attempted to make something like this, so I struggled a bit. First with attaching them to the head, and then later weight painting them. I actually textured him before I made the tentacles, because I was just impatient to see how the textures would turn out. So I chucked the retopoed and unwrapped glue to Substance Painter and baked the mesh maps using the sculpt as high poly mesh and got the texturing. I started with this lizard skin material, adjusted the different layers to my taste, and then added color variation and dirt. Because in my mind, glue is the mechanic of the ship in the film, so it would make sense for him to be a little dirty and grimy. Now this part I actually enjoy, and would enjoy more had I done the UVs with love and care, because I did have to dodge around with a couple of issues with the seams, but it wasn't too bad. Once I was happy with the look, I exported the textures, this time with the right settings, where the ambient occlusion, metallic, and roughness are all baked in one image file on different color channels. Back in Blender, I first used the AutoRig Pro add-on to generate Glue's rig, but ultimately decided against it because I needed to customize it, and since I wasn't gonna animate it in Blender, all the extra doodads and control layers were just in the way. I'm not super familiar with this add-on. I know it's powerful, but I'm not. So I went to trusty old Mixamo and generated a simple rig that I know will work just fine, and then brought that back to Blender. I fine-tuned some of the bone positions and added the bones for the tentacles and eyes, and then it was time to adjust the weights. This is another part I don't care for. It drives me insane. Anywho, after that long fight was over, I wanted to test how he would move. I had recorded his scenes earlier on my phone, and I took that footage to Quickmagic. They got a nice, fresh new site and UI, which I really liked. There's new interesting tools and features that I gotta test out later, but for now, I wanted to try out the new animation-based model version 2. And for me, these short films, I often don't need super jumps or ninja kicks, but rather simple movements that serve the story and the character. But even so, I can already tell this new model is super powerful and the result is very accurate and stable animation. Previously I had to filter out noise and fix some things, but now it's pretty much good to go straight out of Quickmagic. If you want to check out their new features, use the link in the description. I then retargeted the animation in Blender, again using the AutoRig Pro, and it worked like a charm. No problems this time. Now, I considered whether his clothes would be simulated or just rigged. Would I do them in Marvelous or Blender? Because it doesn't move a whole lot in the film and doesn't have big flowy clothes on, so both ways were kind of fine. I started with Marvelous Designer, where I made the basic shapes and simulated them on him. I was actually surprised how much tinkering I had to do to get the clothes to fit on him in a natural way. I then exported those simple meshes back to Blender, where I duplicated them and using the dynamic topology sculpted more detail onto them. I also added extra stuff like the belt, some tools and pockets. Next, I brought the clothes into the Substance Painter and again baked the high poly detail from the sculpts onto the original Marvelous Designer mesh and did the textures. The concept art had a donut on his shirt, and I thought it might be a fun nod to Blender Group's famous donuts, so I slapped that in there. Of course, to make everything move, I transferred the weights from the body onto the clothes. Finally, it was time to import the character, the textures, and the mocap into Unreal. In the skin material, I overlaid another seamless skin normal map on top of the original normal map to get some more detail on him. And then I added him to the same test sequence where I had Bob and Eve from before, and there you go. They're all alive. This character was a challenge, and it took me maybe 4 days or so. I was worried that it would turn out crappy. But I think it's alright, right? Let me know what you think. Next, we'll make some clothes for Eve, assemble the scenes by lining up the animations, and then start building the spaceship interior. Alright, if you enjoy these kind of workflow videos or would like to get a more specific tutorial about some of this stuff, let me know in the comments, and remember to subscribe. Thanks. I'll see you next time.